Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon or good evening or good night, wherever you are, different parts of the world. Thank you all for joining. This is exciting. If you look at the topic, it's something really interesting and it's something that we should be talking about constantly. I'm Krishna Vidula from India. I represent Indo Universal Collaboration for Engineering Education. So these webinar series are a part of a partnership between University of Massachusetts Lowell, Jack Wilson Center for Entrepreneurship, and IUCEE. So I'm going to hand this over to Professor William Yale from University of Massachusetts Lowell College of Business. Okay, over to you, Bill, to introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Krishna. Appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. Good morning. We're pleased today to have Sridhar Iyengar to deliver quite a stirring topic, I think, for those of us who are currently employed in academics right now. Sridhar is a serial entrepreneur in connected medical devices and wearables, and he's focused on strategy and management of a company known as Elemental Machines. Previously, he was a founder and director of Misfit, makers of elegant wearable products, a company that was actually acquired at a good exit by Fossil in 2015. Before Misfit, he founded Agamatrix, a blood glucose monitoring company. Agamatrix was a successful business and actually shipped over 15 FDA cleared medical products. Sridhar holds over 3 US and international patents and received his PhD from Cambridge University as a Marshall Scholar. Beyond Elemental Machines, Sridhar has been known to run great distances, 13.1 miles on occasion, and has sometimes been spotted on stage behind a wall of drums. Sridhar, we're pleased to have you here today with us. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me, and really excited to be here. Hopefully, this is all clear on the screen. I think everyone should be able to see this. When I was approached to give a talk to everyone here, we chatted a little bit about the different topics that might be interesting to the audience. And one thing that popped out was the path going from academic research to startups and entrepreneurship. And about a year or two ago, I'd written a blog post about that journey, and I thought that maybe diving into some of the lessons that I learned about that transition would be a good topic for today. So what I'm going to do is just give you a pictorial history of how I built my last 3 companies, and as we go through, provide a commentary on the lessons that I learned. So just to give you some background, as William mentioned, I started a company called Agamatrix in 2001. It was based on my PhD work, and we grew that company. Still running now. It's 20 years old, still running independently, and the company makes a lot of the store brand glucose meters in the US. So the CVS brand of glucometer, we make the Kroger pharmacy brand, Target pharmacy brand, the Amazon healthcare choice brand. We also make all of the glucose meters for Sanofi. So Sanofi is, I think, the #2 largest insulin manufacturer. So we white label and make all their glucometers. The claim to fame that we had at Agamatrix is that we made the world's first medical device to physically plug into the iPhone in it. And it was obviously a glucose meter, since that's all we made. But that device on the right, if you remember the old 30-pin connector from the iPhone 3, iPhone 4 era, that's a glucometer that plugs right into the bottom. And that we launched in 2010. And really, that's the product that caught Sanofi's attention. That's how the whole deal came together. But that experience of bringing a medical device into the iOS ecosystem really inspired us to go deeper into digital health. And to do that in 2010, we had to move out from under the FDA and not really be a regulated medical device company. So that's why in 2011, we started a company. I have the same co-founder. We transitioned out and we started a company called Misfit Wearables, where we started making fitness trackers. The goal was to make a number of other wearable and biometric products, really to service the health and wellness industry. But we rapidly grew that one, and we honestly, we just got lucky on timing. We got in at the right time and we got out at the right time, and we rode that full fitness track. We sold it to Fossil for a little over 250 million back in 2015. I started in machine, and the joke goes that after the last two companies, there's incredibly high investor expectations right now. And really, Elemental Machines took everything I learned about wireless sensors from the Misfit experience and applied it to all the headaches and problems I had at Agamatrix, which was really to get data off of out of our factory where we were making our glucose sensors. But I don't want to get into the details of that because that's not what the topic of this talk is about. But this is really about this journey. And let's start out with Agamatrix. In 2001, I kind of mentioned this slide might be a little out of date, but we make glucose meters. But the whole thing started in my apartment. And this was, we were based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just on the other side of the river from Boston. And I show this because this was my one-bedroom apartment. My co-founder was actually my old roommate from undergrad. And so one of the things that I learned through this process was, wow, the friends that you make in college are going to be transformative in your life. So for me, my roommate as an undergraduate has been my business partner across 3 companies for 20 years, and we do co-investments together now as well. So just the value of that network that I had in college was fantastic. So in 2001, my old college roommate moved into my apartment in Cambridge, and it was a one-bedroom place. So that's not going to stop us. We built a second wall out of a cardboard and some plywood, and basically held everything together with cable ties. That's me 20 years ago with a lot more hair. And can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Sridhar.
Oh, great. Okay. I think something happened. Yeah. So the first thing I learned in doing startups was everything I learned by being a frugal student absolutely carries over when you have no money and you're trying to start a company. So grab whatever you can for free. And that was sort of the first lesson. The next lesson was
so just to turn off your video, turn off your camera, turn off your video.
Oh, okay.
The bandwidth maybe
Yes,
forget. Turn off your
okay.
video.
All right.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay,
Perfect. It's even better.
Okay. So when we were starting our blood glucose company, the main thing we had to do was to convince investors that we had some technology. And to do that, we had to collect data. Now, this was 20 years ago before there was shared facilities. I think like companies like WeWork didn't exist. Certainly shared laboratory facilities did not exist. So we had to do everything in the kitchen. So I put together this horrendously looking prototype, cracked up my engineering textbook from years ago and put together something that kind of worked. And we had to get data from blood glucose measurements just so we can show that our technology worked. And without getting into detail, our technology was all around noise cancellation. So how do you improve signal to noise ratio with glucose sensors by just a pure data science approach? But to do that, we needed raw data. And so how do you get blood glucose data without blood? Well, you go back to what you did in grad school. Get some water, put it through a water filter, you clean it up as much as you can, throw some salt in it for electrolyte, and then throw some sugar in it to simulate glucose levels. So this is what I did in grad school, and we did it in our kitchen. And that got us enough data to demonstrate to investors that we had something. So one of the things was we didn't need something fancy, and we had to sell a concept before we actually had a product. And when you boil it down to what is the core thing that we need to do here, that core thing is just to show one graph, one data set that tells investors that we have the core value proposition, the core technology, and to say that, hey, if this data set looks good, then everything else is de-risked, and everything else downstream to go from this data to a product in the market is just about throwing money at it, hiring people, and building a product. The core technology works, and here's the one graph that proves it. So that's what we did. We spent 6 months in my kitchen getting that data, analyzing it, building models, and generating that one plot, that one graph, that one data set that allowed us to effectively sell to investors a vision of something that didn't exist yet. So then we got some seed funding, and the seed funding was all about go replicate your results in whole human blood. And I show you a picture of a beach because this was in Sydney, Australia. We didn't have access to any shared facilities in Boston. Tried to call all the universities. All the universities said, no thanks, not unless we own all of your intellectual property rights, which we could not agree to. But it turned out when I was in graduate school in the UK, the postdoc, when I was a PhD student, the postdoc who trained me was actually from Australia. So he went back to Australia after his contract ended, and he became faculty at a university in Sydney. So I called him up, again, leveraging the network that you find in academia. Called him up and I said, hey, I need to gather data on whole human blood. I need to rent lab space. I can't pay you much, and you get no intellectual property rights. And can you please turn a blind eye while I take blood from my own arm and don't tell anyone? And well, basically worked. So he said, okay, all right, fine, come on over. So that's what we did. We flew to Australia for 6 months and gathered blood data. So so myself and a second postdoc that I had worked with in graduate school in my PhD, he flew from London to Sydney. I flew from Boston to Sydney, and we joined our third colleague there. And we spent 6 months gathering data in whole human blood and replicating what I had done in my kitchen. And that's the next data set that we needed. So at that point, we had some money. We hired some engineers back in Boston, and they crunched all the data while we were gathering the data in Australia. Then when we got that data set, we flew back to Boston, and we said, okay, now let's start making some prototype devices. And we didn't have a lot of money, so we needed to build a clean room to make glucose biosensors. And of course, we didn't have the money for a clean room. So what we did was we went to the home goods store, bought some high purity home HEPA air filters, mounted them on top of this little contraption, built this, hung shower curtains down to make a makeshift clean room in a basement office that we had rented. So we basically had a clean room made of shower curtains and air filters that you can buy at the home goods store. And we were able to build prototype devices that, again, just showed the next step of development. None of this was good enough to be published, but it was certainly good enough to get funding. After we got funding, we then moved to a big lab, hired some real people, and got more and more data. And at that point, we embarked on getting FDA clearance. And this was the team in 2004. We had about 25 people or something. I show this slide because if you see all the paper on the table, every line is one document that we needed to create for the FDA. Green meant the document was created. White means it hasn't been started yet. Yellow means it's in review, and red means there's something wrong with the document. So this is how much paperwork we needed to create just for an over-the-counter glucose meter. But we did it, and then we set up manufacturing in China and South Korea through contract manufacturers. And then at the end of Q1 in 2006, we made our first shipment. The truck pulled up, we put the first pallet on, we pushed it on, and it drove down to our first customer. And that began the run for scale. So in 2007, we invested into our partner in South Korea, which I think we put in, I don't know how much money we put in, but we put in a couple of $1 million. And then the government there put in a multiple of that as part of an investment incentive. So our partners in Korea built this built this factory pretty much just for our product. And we scaled it that way. And then, as I mentioned, when the iPhone came out in 2007 or 8, we embarked on building a glucose meter that plugged into the iPhone. And we launched that in 2010 under the Sanofi brand name. And the cool thing was you could walk into the Apple store and actually buy our product. And it turned out it was the first product that used blood as the user interface in the Apple store. And yeah, that was 2010, and that got us into this world of digital health. And at that point, we realized that my co-founder and I had been there for 10 years, and it was really time to go on to our next adventure. So we transitioned out. We had a professional CEO running it, and then we transitioned out and we started our next company, Misfit Wearables, in 2011. And back to the drawing board. We rented a house. This was in San Francisco, and we literally worked out of the apartment yet again. And this time we had about 25, 30 people working out of the house. And one of the things that we had to do was to figure out what product to make. And we ended up making fitness trackers because prior to this, we were actually very, very close to integrating our glucose meter through the iPhone with Fitbit. So we knew the Fitbit guys pretty well, and we tried to integrate, but the FDA was not too keen on sharing medical data at that point. So we knew the fitness tracker market through our interactions there. And when we did Misfit, we said, hey, this whole market is exploding, so why don't we just make a better mousetrap? That's what we did, and we prototyped it, by putting different form factors together. And this is the one that finally won. It was the size of 2 quarters stuck together. And then all of the logistics was done out of the house that we rented. And you can see that might have actually been my bedroom. I can't remember now. But we had, mailing boxes coming out of the bedroom, and we did fulfillment out of the garage. Yeah, you can see the kitchen off to the right, the refrigerator. So the dining room was full of inventory. Living room was all QC and test. And then, yet again, we ended up back in the Apple store. So we did our product launch at the Apple store in 2012 or maybe 13, I think. So that was exciting. And then we took it internationally. This was a trade show in China, in Shenzhen. And one of the things that we realized is when you build a product, and especially a consumer product and a consumer brand, you have people trying to copy you. And here, this was at one of the conferences where we saw a product very similar to ours on the top left, where the Guangdong Transtech Medical Electronics Company, apparently our OEM partner, decided to copy the design. And we saw a ton of copycat designs popping up all over the Chinese market. And we had to fight those through trademark and copyright and design patent approaches. And we did. But these are things that you don't think about when you're building a product. You don't really think about how do you fight copycats. But we kind of had to. So that leads me to Elemental Machines. So in 2015, we sold Fossil. So we sold Misfit to Fossil, and I started Elemental Machines with the same co-founder. And Elemental Machines, again, rinse and repeat. We started the prototyping back in my apartment yet again, doing experiments in the living room, building prototypes. And then ultimately today, we've got almost 300 customers. We service big pharma customers. We have partnerships with global brands like Siemens and Agile and PerkinElmer and a number of other major players. And so that's sort of what brings us to today. And I thought what I would do, I think I ran through this relatively fast. But what I wanted to do is actually go through some of the lessons that we learned through this entire process. So let me just here we go. So one of the things that I learned was how consumers behave and how they think. And one of the things I like to I like to explain is that people don't really buy cars for the right reasons. A lot of people make purchasing decisions for a car based on the cup holder. We call that the cup holder principle, which is when you have something like a vehicle, a car, what's under the hood does matter. It's necessary, but not sufficient. And very often the purchasing decisions are made by seemingly trivial things like, is a cup holder big enough to hold my favorite cup of coffee or my favorite mug? And that's absolutely something that I've witnessed in the car buying process and in other situations. And the way that this manifests is when we made our glucose meter for Agamatrix, we thought that the accuracy and the performance and the algorithms and all that were the most efficient. The number one feature that our customers were excited about was not the accuracy. It was actually the fact that our glucose meters had rubber grips on the side. And that struck us as really awkward. When we did all the customer surveys, they said, yeah, the rubber grips are great. That's why we like your product. And it turns out it's because many of our customers were elderly and many of them had arthritis. And holding and grabbing a glucose meter was not an easy task for them. So for them, having rubber grips meant that they could hold the glucose meter much more comfortably. It's not something we would have ever guessed or ever would have figured out by focus groups. But when we looked at that, we said, wow, if that's the feature that people like, then that's the one where we should have in all of our products. So of course, the accuracy and all that was important, but ultimately people loved our product really for the rubber grips. And that's our version of the coffee cup, or the cup holder. At Misfit, we had a similar experience. When we were figuring out what the USP or the unique selling proposition was for a fitness tracker, we had to figure out, we had to do some market research. Now, bear in mind, this was 2011. So Fitbit was really the major player. Jawbone had their Jawbone Up product, and Nike Fuel Band still had their product. Nike didn't really matter because we knew that they were not serious about electronics. Jawbone it's really Fitbit. So we had to find out what the unmet need was. And had we done focus groups or had we done other types of activities, we wouldn't have really found the most important feature. What we did was we actually looked at all the Amazon reviews. And we were able to distill from the Amazon reviews of the Jawbone product, the Nike product, and the Fitbit product, what the three top complaints were. The number one complaint was they hated having to recharge the Fitbit every 1 to 2 days, which was the case back in 2011. And we could have probably guessed that, but it was surprising that it was the number one complaint more than anything else combined. The number two complaint was that it had to be waterproof. And this was a little bit of a surprise because it wasn't because of swimming or taking a shower, which is what we would have thought. It was because people would leave the Fitbit in their jeans pockets and then put the jeans in the washing machine, and then the Fitbit would get damaged. So really, we had to build a product that would withstand washing machines. And then number three is that they wanted a product that was not confined to the wrist and looked good. So those three were our main inputs. And it turned out that battery life was important, so we did that, waterproof that. But the thing that really drove sales was actually colors. And we didn't realize this at the time, but it it reminded us of another lesson that we learned back in our Agamatrix glucose meter days. And that was Johnson & Johnson had a glucose meter called the One Touch Ultra. They actually came out with 6 different colors of this glucometer. And you think it's a medical device, why do colors matter? Well, it turned out that colors, offering this product in 6 different colors, was drove the biggest increase in revenue in that product's history. Simply offering it in 6 different colors changed this product from being viewed as a medical device to being viewed as a personalized consumer product, even though it was an FDA-regulated medical device. And we saw this work in the glucose meter world, and then we realized it would also work in the fitness tracker world. So we were able to grow our market share by making our fitness tracker in multiple colors. And it had a knock-on effect. One, consumers loved it because now they started looking at this fitness tracker as a piece of jewelry as opposed to a fitness tracker. So that was great. But the other thing it afforded us was, excuse me, we were able to use colors as a way to differentiate between different channel partners and different distribution partners. So, for example, one of our big retail distribution partners was Best Buy, and Best Buy, big box retailer here in the U.S. Their corporate colors are blue and yellow. So we offered to them a fitness tracker, the same circular disc that I've shown you, but in blue and yellow colors, and they were thrilled. And they put so much marketing and so much effort behind promoting that, just because they had their corporate colors. And we realized that we could do this with other. So Coca-Cola, we gave them red. So we gave Coca-Cola a red color fitness tracker exclusively for them, and they promoted it. And Victoria's Secret has a brand called Pink, and so we gave them pink as a color, co-branded with Victoria's Secret. So they pushed it all to their health and wellness and fitness and yoga and meditation customers. And then with Speedo, the swimwear company, we gave them white. So colors became a huge driving factor, much like rubber grips became a huge driving factor for the glucose meters. So both of these, when I look back, these are lessons that I would have never learned in academia. Nobody would have ever guessed that making something in a new color would double, triple, quadruple, and 10x our sales. But it did. And that's, being able to take a step back and say, it's not the algorithms that power the fitness tracker, the step counts, the breathing rates. It's not the algorithms that drive the accuracy of your glucometer and the accuracy of that number. Those are necessary, but those aren't the features that are going to skyrocket your sales and your market share. It's understanding consumer end user psychology and behavior. So that was one of my big my big lessons. And then the other lesson, I think I hinted to this, is when you think about doing market research, the typical approach, very traditional marketing approach, is you should do a focus group. And the problem with focus groups or surveys is that you don't really get to the real answers. A, it's a small sample size, and B, the way you run the focus group also affects how they respond. So what we did in the case of Agamatrix was we didn't do focus groups. We actually asked people to take photos of how they test their blood sugar. And so we said, from the time you take the glucose meter out of your wallet, out of your bag or your purse, take a video or take a photo of every single step so we can see what you do. So really, we observed them in their natural habitat, so to speak. And from that, we learned a ton. One of those was, again, it was reinforced by the rubber grips idea, is that we had some folks who had difficulty opening the package, opening the bag that holds the glucose meter. So really grabbing the zipper was the problem. So one thing we learned is we put a big loop a big physical handle on that zipper so they could open it. It sounds like a very trivial thing to do, but that's things like that are what made people love our product. And with the Misfit story, I think I mentioned that we didn't do surveys or focus groups or user studies. Instead, we looked at Amazon reviews, because where else are you going to get people being brutally honest, either positive or negative? It's going to be those reviews. And so I believe we had an intern spend 2 weeks, look through about 2,000 reviews, and then compile them into the top 3 categories of complaints. And so those are observations in people's natural habitats. So that's not a contrived situation like a focus group. And from that, really what we got is on the fitness tracker side, the idea that if we make our product look like jewelry, then it will really impact the psychology and emotional side of a user. And one of the design criteria that we had was people should wear our product even if it doesn't work. And it sounds crazy, but if you think about it, that's what jewelry is. Jewelry is a non-functional item that you wear because you like the way it looks and you like the way it makes you feel. Jewelry is not functional. So our design ethos was, hey, people should wear our product even if it doesn't work. And that's what led us to make products that acted more like jewelry, and more importantly, had the emotional and psychological attachment to a user the way the jewelry does. And we had many folks who tell us, yeah, it stopped working for whatever reason, but I still wear it because it looks cool. And these are things that we don't really learn in school. Like, how can you sell a product that doesn't work? Well, you look at similar products that don't work that people do buy, like jewelry. And ultimately, what this taught me was I learned more about selling from watching movies, from watching fairy tales, from watching movies and reading fairy tales than I did from reading business books. Business books will tell you some of the factual things, but ultimately, when you're trying to sell something, whether it's a product to an end user, a customer, or whether you're trying to sell a vision of your startup to an investor, it's all about storytelling. And in storytelling, you need to create this emotional pull, this psychological anchor that entrances and captures your audience in a way where they can see the vision that you can see, even when you have nothing to show them. And great movies, great fairy tales like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, whatnot, they capture that imagination, unlike anything I've ever come across in a business, in a business book or whatever. And so my sort of takeaways through all of this is that really telling a great story, part of what you do as an entrepreneur. So with that, I think that's all I had. I'm happy to turn it over to the audience to ask questions. I think we have another half hour or something. So happy to turn it over to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Bill, you're back, and I'll come back, and we'll see generate conversation here. All right, gang, you be out there.
Maybe I'll get things started, Krishna, because
Yeah.
I wanted to add a very interesting presentation, Sridhar, by the way. Intriguing and thought-provoking and maybe also controversial, depending on who's in our audience. One area that would be wonderful for you to expound upon is that storytelling piece you left us with at the end, because, you know, obviously substance still needs to be there, but how you communicate a story is inherently important to any kind of investor pitch. And I think certainly it gets to some of the challenges that we have in academia in terms of developing a much more sort of practical curriculum where we instruct students on how to, communicate and message a particular pitch on an opportunity. So you can maybe expand upon that. That would be great. The communication element, and maybe based on your experience, what you think we might do in the classroom to do things a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit up on a very, very salient point, is that you can't tell a story if there's no substance. And if you do, you might end up like Theranos. so let's not do that. The key to this is understanding the necessary but not sufficient mindset, which is you need to have something under the hood of a car, or else you don't have a car. You need to have tires, or else you don't have a car. But if you don't have the right cup holder, you may not get the sale done. And so what that means to me is, especially if you're doing a medical device or something that's technology dependent, you need to have that core technology sorted out. You don't need to have it sorted out all the way, but you do need to have a roadmap to say we're at point A here. We need to do point B, C, D, E, F, and G, and by the time we get to point X, we have a product. You need to lay out that roadmap and then highlight a few trigger points to say we're at point A. Point C is the next milestone, then point M is the next milestone, then point W is the next milestone. And pick those three out and say, we have data that shows that we can get to that point C. Here's why we think we can get to that point C. We're not there yet, but here's the core challenge, the core issue. And to look at this and say, look, dear investor, this is not a if we're going to get there discussion. This is a when we're going to get there discussion, because this data set proves the principle has been shown. Now everything is purely in economic and timeline and resource issue. And that's how I've always approached my storytelling, is to say, here's a grand vision, here's the steps we need to get there. There's 2 or 3 major milestones, and here's initial data that gives us confidence that we have de-risked our path to getting there. So without that substance, you're selling. You have nothing to sell. But if you just dive into the details and talk about this data set, this data set, this data, here's the market size, here's this, here's that, you're not going to capture imagination. This is about what is the world going to look like if our technology, our product is on the market. Here's how the world is going to be drastically different, and here's why no one else can do it.
Thank you.
Let's keep the questions coming. Bill, you can keep going if you want to ask some more questions, but I haven't.
Yeah,
I'll just keep going. You keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll kind of ask a little bit of a follow-on question here. Is that, what do you see as some of the additional challenges associated with spinning, science or technology out, even of a university setting, for example? That might be an interesting area of discussion, because certainly there are those of us who have done that in the past and been involved in it. And what do you see as some of the key challenges beyond that sort of that communication consideration?
Yeah, I think the first most practical challenge is the licensing. If you're going to license something out of university, just make sure that those licensing terms are such that they will continue to be attractive to investors. And there's some there's some standard royalty numbers that are generally used, but I'd say first get that house in order. If you don't have the right licensing agreement, then future investors are not going to be attracted to the business. So, but that's more that's more operational. But beyond that, it's all about getting that founding team. The ideal situation is if it's a scientific spin-out, is that the principal investigator, the professor who was doing this, should be a scientific advisor, have enough equity to have them motivated to continue helping. But it's very rare that I've seen a professor step out and say, all right, I'm going to give up my day job as a professor and run this company. It's very rare that I've seen that done. And even rarer I've seen that done well. That's because there's different skill sets. What I've usually seen is that one of the graduate students, postdocs or PhD students, takes the lead and spins it off and is the CEO or the CTO as one of the founders operationally, and then might team up with somebody from the business school, maybe to fill out that team. But I think getting that founding team is extremely important, and the big risk is, just to put things in perspective, I also wear an investor hat at times. I do angel investing, and I'm involved in a couple of early stage funds. So I see a lot of pitch decks wearing my investor hat. And one of the first questions we ask is, how long have the founders known each other, and in what capacity have they worked together? Have they gone through ups and downs, or did they just meet at a networking event last semester? Longevity of working with the co-founder is huge, because it really is like a marriage. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have huge arguments, and you have to stick through it. In my case, my co-founder was my old college roommate back in the day, and now he's been my business partner for 20 years. So it's kind of a non-issue at this point. But starting out, one of the big selling points of the two of us was that we have known each other, and it's a huge amount of inbuilt trust. So when you're spinning something out of a university, I highly, highly encourage everyone to start building that network on day one, because you want to be able to pull together a founding team that has more than a couple of months since they've met. If there's people that you've just met recently, they can be employee number 1, 2, and 3. But if you're going to bring a co-founder on board, you're going to be going through very, very tough times. And so the practical implications of this are, building that founding team and building that with people that you have a long relationship with.
Wow, amazing insights there. Quick question here from a participant saying, was Shine, I think Shine was one of your products, was it non-functional?
Let me go back to the Shine. Where is it? Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, so it is battery operated. And so when the battery ran out, the user can replace the battery. And so when I said it was non-functional, sometimes the user would let the battery run out and not replace it, but still wear it because it looked nice. And it was easy, you pop the back off and you put a new battery in, simple coin cell. So just to clarify, that's what I meant by when it was non-functional. But our instructions to our design team and product team were to create a product that people would want to wear, even if it did not work. And that was the inspiration that we wanted them to use when they were designing a product aesthetically.
Wow. Yeah, question from me itself, and a couple of really amazing insights that you gave. One is the coffee cup thing and so, and then for your gadget, it was the leather holder. Do business schools teach this kind of stuff in courses?
So, well, it's certainly, I mean, the business schools, I mean, we do the best we can. So as a graduate with an MBA, and then, having worked for years also in a related field to Sridhar's in biopharmaceutical industry, a lot of what you learn, you can apply. But the thing about it is I think that the context here is important, and it's one of the things that we can do as academicians is to try our best to, create, sort of a practical learning experience for the students, as they're developing projects. So, here, a lot of what I learned, for example, in new product development, I learned in class, but at the same time, I was leveraging projects when I was working at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, okay? And actually leveraging those projects as part of the classwork. So as much as it's practical experience for the students, I think it certainly benefits them. And they're you can have a foot both in academia and in industry, and they can reinforce each other. As long as it's done in the right way.
Krishna, I have a comment to make.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sridhar, thank you so much. It was really fascinating to hear your journey. One thing I noticed that each time that you started a new venture, you went back to being an entrepreneur and having the mindset. Yeah, you started in kitchen and you ended in a big business, and again you started in kitchen. So it was fascinating. That's the true nature of an entrepreneur, is to make sure that you start from the basics rather than have a mentality of a big business or an established business and so forth. So from a cost and revenue generation, that's very important to note that you don't go into a grandiose plan, but go back to your basic of being an entrepreneur. So thank you for giving us that journey and that picture of the cluttered kitchen and a bathroom that converted into the clean room and really amazing.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Oh,
yeah,
I'll add one thing to that.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, the reason for doing that, obviously you're constrained with the cash and the investment that you have, but much more important than that is when you hire that first team of 5 or 10 people, you want all of them to embrace that ethic of low cost, be frugal. Because if you get a very fancy office and do all this sort of things, you set a very wrong culture. And when you're 5 or 10 people, it doesn't really matter. But when you're 50 or 100, then the expensive culture is exponentially problematic. Whereas if you set the culture of frugality early on, then as you grow to 50 or 100 people, that mentality still maintains. And so that's the core reason is to establish that visual and emotional anchor to being frugal, and that's really where it comes from. Because sure, we could have afforded an office, but if you do that, you send the wrong message.
And then the other thing I found, Sridhar, was very fascinating was the relentless push for prototype after prototype after prototype. That's something that's amazing, that kids should learn how to do that in colleges.
Yeah, I think Eric Ries has written this book called The Lean Startup, and he basically articulates this idea that don't throw a lot of money at something until you know that you have product market fit, and the way you do that is through prototypes. And at Elemental Machines, we start with the pharmaceutical industry. Our customers are all biotech, pharma, hospitals, and clinics, and we make IoT devices, sensors, little black box sensors that measure things and shoot that information to the cloud. When we started, we hand built a lot of these sensors. We bought stuff. We had if you're familiar with the Arduino board, it's a precursor to anyone. It's simpler to use than the Raspberry Pi. So we just bought Arduinos. We bought some sensors off of the internet, and we literally stuck them together and screwed everything together, and that was good enough to get the first few a few thousand or few hundred units into the field and start generating real revenue. And that's when we realized that we had product market fit. And some prototypes didn't have product market fit, and so we were able to abandon them. But you're right, the relentless pursuit of prototypes allows us to experiment in the market very, very rapidly.
The other dimension to it that you again talked about is the copycats. Yeah, once you build something, yes, lots of copycats crop up. So that then challenges in a completely different dimension. How do you develop the skill set to deal with that issue?
Yeah, well, it depends on the context. If it's a medical product or something that's highly technical, then you can, of course, put a lot of patents around it to protect it. And that's what we did at Egamatrix, a glucose meter company. We had 150 different patents covering all of our technology. So that was a path for that company. For Misfit, because it was a consumer products company, utility patents didn't make a lot of sense. But instead, design patents, trademarks, and copyrights were how we protected it. And so the look and feel, the visual aspect of the product was protected through design patents. So we basically use the legal structures in place for copycats. But there's also another aspect of this. You can build barriers to entry, not just on the physical product, but also the commercial side. we had distribution relationships and co-branding relationships that none of these other copycats would ever have. None of these copycats would be able to do a deal with Coca-Cola or Victoria's Secret or Best Buy. So at best, the copycats could be one-off direct to consumer. The other is network effect. As we started getting more and more people onto our platform, you could run races, you can compete with your other people in the Misfit community. That created a barrier. So if a copycat came out with a product that looked the same, they wouldn't have access to that network. So there are different ways you can protect yourself. But in the case of the copycats, specifically in China, what we did was we actually didn't go after the copycats themselves, because you go after the small company, they'll close shop and they'll 2 days later they'll throw out the same product under a different corporate name. So what we went to is we went to the distributors, the distribution partners in China. So JD.com, I don't think it was Alibaba, but JD.com was a big distributor, and we had partnerships with all of them. So those want to maintain integrity, U.S. and European products. So instead of going to individual copycats, we went to the distribution partners and said, hey, these 5 or 6 here are infringing on our design patent, please kick them out. And they did so immediately because they valued the reputation that they don't have copycats on the website. So again, knowing where to place your efforts is important in terms of strategies, from a strategic.
Okay, back to you, Bill and Ashwin.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Sridhar. We really appreciate your time today. Excellent presentation and thoughtful commentary. I'd like to say, everyone, thank you for your participation, and I'll ask Ashwin to weigh in with a few words because he's been sort of the marshal on our end for a period of time. But we wish everyone a safe and healthy end to the new year. We're in the process of scheduling additional webinars for 2022, so we plan to communicate the schedule for next year coming up in another couple of months. But thanks, everyone. Have a safe end to the year. And Ashwin, I'm not sure if you have any comments on your end.
Yeah, thank you, Bill, and thank you so much, Krishna, for organizing and hosting these webinars. 2021 has been a very, very successful year for our webinars. We have completed 12 webinars this year, and we're looking forward to many more next year. Sridhar, it was really an amazing journey that you explained and gave some pointers that are so basic, but a lot of time in a business school, we missed those pointers, and you gave us some food that will be very helpful for us to teach our students. Don't just get confused between the basic product and the value proposition, and that's an important lesson that needs to be conveyed to the students. So thank you for your excellent presentation discussion, and we look forward to working with you next year as well. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me.
And have a nice holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Thank
cheers.
Yep. Be happy, be safe, be healthy. Okay.
Thanks, Krishna. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.